keep in mind, Washington doesn't function properly right now. So, I mean, that's not what, I don't get the impression that is happening. Are they communicating? Certainly. Is this a four corners, sort of a group of 8 combination of the House and the Senate talking about it? No, they're not. But that's not as partisan as it is institutional. You've covered this a long time. Regardless of which parties are in charge of the House and the Senate, there's still that institutional tension between those two bodies. And the Senate, when they cut a deal, are going to expect their deal to pass. And the House, when they cut a deal, is going to expect their deal to pass, right? But it never happens like that. So should they be doing that? Yeah. Are they? Probably at a very low level, but clearly this is not an equal discussion between the House and the Senate. And does that mean that it's going to take longer? Yes, it does.
And everyone's afraid to get jammed by the other chamber. Right. What do you make of this revelation that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is now communicating regularly with Donald Trump? Would you expect that to be the case? And how much can the former president thumb the scale on this?
Oh, the second question is really interesting. The first question is not. Yes, it makes complete sense for the Speaker of the Republican House of Representatives to be speaking to the de facto leader of the party. The closest thing to the standard bearer. Exactly, and the likely nominee. That, in fact, if they weren't having the conversation, we'd be asking probably harder questions. Whether or not Trump could put his thumb on the scale depends on whether or not, in part, he wants to. I'm not sure he has a position on this yet, and Trump won't take a position, if he's not there yet. Yeah. So I'm not sure I don't know where he is on funding Ukraine. My guess is he's against it, but he's for funding the border and for funding support for Israel. So, it might be one of those things that doesn't fall neatly in any package. Do I think he could put the thumb on the scale with a couple of members? Probably. Are those the members?
He doesn't want Joe Biden to get a deal on the border.
Unless it's a really, really good deal and he can take credit for it. Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty, right? If Donald Trump can deliver the votes to get the deal and it's a good deal, maybe. But you're right. The starting position, I'll agree with you, is that the last thing that Trump wants politically is for Biden to be able to declare a victory this close to the midterm, to the election.
Well, we also had the former president weighing in when we first thought the government was shutting down. He seemed to be encouraging the crowd that said, hey, shut it down, see what happens.
He had that chance a couple times when I was there.
Yeah.
And he had a budget director who really, really wanted him to shut the government down a couple times. And we did it once. You
sure
seriously
did.
Indeed.
We signed a bunch of spending bills that I wish that we had not, and he wished he had not after he signed them.
Well, and we'll see if he has to weigh in again come January 19th, February 2nd, when we're dealing with potentially a two-tiered
5 minutes after Iowa.
Getting closer and closer to Iowa.
Government shutdown. To go back to this idea that Joe raised of Mike Johnson having really close communication with the former president, I wonder if the former president might ultimately be the best ally he had, because how many allies does he realistically have in Congress right now?
Talk about Mike.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, it's sort of when Donald Trump got to Washington, I always said one of his greatest strengths was he didn't have any relationships in town. And one of the greatest weaknesses he had was he didn't have any relationships in town.
And the same is true of Mike Johnson.
Exactly. It can cut both ways. Mike does not have the baggage that McCarthy had and, bad experiences in the past, for example, with, certain members. But he also hasn't been out there raising the money for the last 10 years. And he doesn't have that goodwill built up. So he can cut absolutely both ways. Again, come back to the threshold question. It would be strange for Mike Johnson not to be talking to Donald Trump. I think that the fact that he's talking to him isn't really that remarkable.
So take us for a walk. What's your view here? I mean, do you have a kind of a path in your head about what the next month looks like? Because there's a lot that needs to get done.
Yes,
the next month.
We're
not going to shut down. We're going to get a border deal that makes all this happen.
I remember back when I used to campaign for a living, and people say, "Oh, it's not." I hate that Washington isn't more bipartisan. And I'm like, no. The problem is it's too bipartisan. Because there's one thing that everybody can agree on.
We're getting emails on this one.
I know, and that's spending more money. And that's what they will agree on. They will figure out a way to give everybody enough of what they want to pass a Ukraine funding bill, an Israeli funding bill, a Taiwan funding bill, and a border security bill. And they will keep the government open because the spending numbers will just keep going up and up and up until they buy enough votes.
Chip Roy's head will explode.
That's how you get 30.
I was going to say, not everyone wants to spend more money.
No.
You have members of the Freedom Caucus that are pushing for pretty draconian cuts.
Yeah. You don't get $33 trillion in debt by accident, and you don't get it with one party doing it to you. Both parties hold hand in hand to get you $33 trillion in debt. The only thing this town can agree on in a bipartisan fashion is spending more money.
So Bob Good's running the Freedom Caucus now, we understand. A good steward. He's not getting along with Kevin McCarthy, who we hear is going to try to primary him What's the next year look like for the Freedom Caucus?
Oh, it's rough all over the place. It's going to be rough in the House. I've had folks call me about the Nancy Mace race down in South Carolina. I live in South Carolina still. I went home after I left Washington. And there are folks, trying to line up to run against Nancy, and there's folks asking me, who should run against Nancy. So
Asking you to run
to
again?
run
No.
No.
Who do I know? It's a different district. It's down in Charleston. Not that makes a difference, as you know. You don't have to live in your district. Little piece
Hasn't
of
stopped people
political
in the
trivia.
past.
Exactly. There used to be 4 members of Congress who lived in one district in Wisconsin. But that's another story for another day. There's going to be a lot of internal bloodbaths over that. When Patrick McHenry, and I've not talked to Patrick, so I'm not giving away any private conversations. When Patrick McHenry announced he was retiring from Congress, to me that was the biggest red flag that the Republicans themselves think they are going to lose the majority. Wow. Because Patrick, even though he was term limited, technically, could have easily received an exemption to maintain his position as chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. So there's a guy that if he wins and they hold the majority, he's going to be financial services chairman, and he announces he's leaving. To me, that tells me that he doesn't think we're going to keep the majority. And when you break it down and you talk about Republicans fighting against Republicans in certain districts, you talk about losing Kevin McCarthy and his ability to raise all that money, a lot of the things that are lining up to have a tough year for the House Republicans. Does Donald Trump make that better or worse? That's really sort of the unknown at this point. But right now, if you had to bet, you'd bet that the Republicans would struggle to keep the House, and that also doesn't breed a lot of goodwill in that building.
So you think it's not that people are deciding to retire because of dysfunction, but maybe they recognize the dysfunction is going to cost them?
It's a variety of things, right? There's so many of them, Kailey, that it's hard to sort of paint with a broad brush. Some of them are retiring to run for higher office. Some of them are retiring because they've been here forever. And then some are retiring because they might think they're losing the majority. Some of the time because it's just not fun anymore. And it really isn't. And are the people who are running for higher office saying, well, I wasn't going to run for higher office, but this place is so miserable, so why not take a chance at running for higher office? So it can be a combination of all things. But this is, when you walk into the building, and I'm in the building not that much, but more than the average citizen, it's not friendly right now. And that's members that's people intra-party, and it's not just Republicans. Democrats have their own issues. It's institutional, and it's across party lines. It's tough right now.
So much for the Christmas spirit.
Yeah.
I guess. Was it fun when you started?
Was it fun when I started?
Or has that just been your tenure?
I think things have certainly changed. I think that we've gone. It's the Vivek Ramaswamy phenomena and Vivek Ramaswamy is someone who came of age in politics during the Donald Trump era. So for someone who's only been involved in politics for 6 or 7 years, Donald Trump looks normal. Wow. Donald Trump can get away with what Donald Trump does because he's a unique thing. He's a black swan event, right? Yeah. But everybody else is out there thinking, well, if I act like Donald Trump, I'll be as successful as he is on both parties. And that's not the way that things are supposed to work, and it's the reason things aren't working.